Hi folks. In this story set and unit for the week, we are continuing on with postmodern ideas, but we are extending that to the end of our timeline and beyond with speculative fiction and science fiction. So speculative fiction is a category of fiction that includes basically any story that exists in a speculated world, meaning any story that exists in a world different from our own. This includes fantasy novels like Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings. It includes horror and paranormal stories. It includes dystopian stories. It includes science fiction stories. And that is the tradition that we're working with in these next story sets. It's one of my favorites, so I'm super excited. Now, the first two that you are reading are in the published in 1950 and 1951, Kurt Vonnegut's EPICAC and Ray Bradbury's The Veldt. And the focus of these two stories is twofold. So first of all, one of the conflicts that really takes root in postmodern literature and that we see in a lot of postmodern literature is man versus technology, which we hadn't, seen to this extent before. So a lot of writers in the postmodern era are writing about fears related to technology and technology's role in our lives. Now, both of these stories deal with that fear, and they deal with it in a really interesting way. So these stories were published in 1950 and 1951, and this was a period of time where there was a lot of fear about technology for a couple of reasons. Number one, we're just coming off the heels of World War II, and the atomic bomb was just dropped. So the idea of modern technology and modern science and what are the boundaries of science, what we're capable of with science, that was something that was concerning for writers and people alike. And another thing that was very present on people's minds is the development of technology that was taking place. So for context, in 1950, about 10%, less than 10% of US households owned a television set. And in 1960, 10 years later, 90% of US households owned a television set. So that's just one example, but technology is starting to make its way into our lives in a very different way than it ever had before. And many people are very fearful of this, given, what sort of relationship with technology they see us having in the future. And now, everybody carries around, a form of a television basically in their pocket. So it's a really interesting sort of exercise in what, in this sort of idea of technology and the cultural anxieties that literature writes about. And Vonnegut and Bradbury are very known for writing about their fears of technology, but not necessarily technology. I would argue that both Vonnegut and Bradbury are really writing about people, their fear of what people will do with technology, and what that will mean for us and for what it means to be human, and at what point does technology stop being a machine to us. I think that is something to think about in both of the stories that you're reading. It's also interesting to read Vonnegut's short story coming off of reading his sort of nonfiction chapter of Slaughterhouse-Five to get an idea of the different sort of styles that he uses in the postmodern style of writing. Now, Ray, and you're familiar with Vonnegut, so I look forward to seeing what you think about EPICAC, but I want to talk about Ray Bradbury's The Veldt. Now, dystopian stories, you'll watch a video in the next step that goes into this in a little bit more detail, but dystopian stories ultimately rely on this idea of a utopia. And what is a utopia? A perfect place. And I think when it comes to these two stories, you want to think about that and think about technology and what is the perfect world in terms of technology, and how can technology make our world more perfect? Both authors are sort of questioning that, but in Ray Bradbury's The Veldt, you have this world with a house that does everything for you, basically. And think about that. If your house could clean and cook and do all of the various chores that we all complain about every single day, think about, does that sound kind of nice to have a house that can take care of those things itself? It might, right? And the story also deals with artificial reality and the ability to create any reality you want in a very real way. And, I think probably the popularity of virtual reality today is a testament to how sort of interesting and intriguing that is to many people. And if you take away the conflict of the story, this kind of, arguably looks like a world where technology has been perfected in a lot of ways. However, the story is pointing to the ways in which it has not. And you have this family who is dealing in this, perfect sort of technology that the world has created for them, and Bradbury is exposing the imperfections there. And this is really something to think about in the story. The story also has a lot of rich symbolism and allusion to it. The two children are named Peter and Wendy, which is an allusion to Peter Pan. You're going to think about that, the ideas of escapism. And ultimately, I want you to think about what both of these stories are saying about what it means, what is the most human part about us, and what is the difference between us and machine. I look forward to hearing your thoughts on this. You'll learn more about dystopia before you get into EPICAC, and then we'll move on to the Veldt, and I'll hear your thoughts on these two great dystopian speculative fiction texts.